All right, this is show number 165, recorded on February 23rd, 2016. And, Tim, I seem like I say this so often, and I'm excited about tonight's show, but this is a topic we really haven't covered before. Up in 165 shows, we haven't covered this. We've mentioned it a few times here and there, and I just want to say that no matter how in-depth our guest goes tonight, we really can't do justice to this topic in one show. This is really, we could do a whole series on this topic, because I think that the majority of us photographers really haven't looked at this maybe ever, or at least in a while, and it really deserves another look. And that is free and open source software. And I know there's some terminology there. I may not get everything right tonight. So Pat, welcome Pat David to the show tonight, and you're going to help set me straight on some of these things.
I'll do my best.
Because I don't even know if I got the free open source software right, because there's also, I've seen free FLOSS.
Yep.
And I should mention that the way we got in touch with you was a listener. I think I sent you the email there, Tim, or gave you a copy of it. A listener named Chad Baker pointed us out to Pat and said, hey, he would be awesome to have on the show. And I looked up his information and said, yes, you're right. He would be awesome to have on the show. And Chad is a viewer. He views the show over on Vimeo. We don't get a lot of views over on Vimeo, but we're going to keep putting them out there. Maybe we'll get more Chad to watch us, more Chads to watch us. So, Chad, thank you for putting us in touch with Pat. And with that, Pat, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in photography and how you got involved in this free open source software community.
Yeah, sure. Right. So I guess I've been photographing since early high school for me, which would have been before the 90s, if that dates me a little bit, unfortunately.
That's me too, so don't feel bad.
Yeah. On film at that time, right? So
yes.
Yeah. I had been shooting quite a bit then, and then I kind of tapered off for quite some time and went off and did engineering school and things like that. And just life kind of caught up with me. And I finally, it's funny, about, I don't know, probably I'd say about 10 or 11 years ago, I said, you know what, I really wanted to play around with some software. And I'd always been a free software user, mostly because the tenets of free software I agreed with quite a bit, which is mainly that software should be free to use. The code should be available to read, to modify, and to redistribute however a user would like to do it within certain legal concepts that get set up. Is kind of that underlying driving idea behind the whole thing. And there's some splits which will happen in the community when you hear things like FLOSS or FOSS or free software. I'm not going to get any of those right now or at all tonight. I'm going to steer clear of all of those controversies and just call it free software in general. But the basic idea is it's free, and it's free for me to use, and free for me to distribute, and free for me to modify and share with other people. And what happens is out of that community grew, basically the whole free software community you might be familiar with now, Linux and all the various Unisys, Linuxes and FreeBSDs and the OpenSUSEs and all the rest of them. So those are the tenets that I agreed with quite a bit. I like that freedom. Mm-hmm. And it was probably the number one thing. So on my own site, which is Pixels, I have a community forum, and I had asked the community members, all of them photographers really, what are some of the things that you might like me to point out to you guys or to the photographic community in general that might be watching the show, that's kind of an important point to bring up. And almost invariably it was centered around the idea of having those kinds of freedoms, right? Like, I can't fathom the idea that if my livelihood was based around photography, that my work would be held captive by another person. That's what I think blew me away about it, right? So if you're on an Adobe Creative Cloud solution of some sort, if you can't pay your subscription for a couple of months, you no longer can modify those files, right?
Right.
Your files, not someone else's, none of that. Your own photographs are unable to be modified in that software any longer. And that's something I can't wrap my head around personally and ideally, right? And a lot of us are idealists. Believe me, we're filled with idealisms in the free software movement. But that's the thing, I think, more than anything else. Because what happens is that even if nobody ever develops RAWTherapee or Darktable or GIMP ever again, I have a version right now on my hard drive I will always be able to use or modify if I really wanted to learn and be able to do it.
Yeah, I think some people are having an issue with, especially when they first did this, and I'm sure still today, with the idea of basically renting the software, that you can no longer purchase Photoshop. You can purchase Lightroom, at least for now, but you can't purchase Photoshop. You'd have to rent it. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of commercial software is heading. I would imagine that eventually operating systems, Mac and Windows, will eventually go down that same route too. They love that because they love that recurring revenue, and once you're in it, you're hooked if you're going to keep doing that.
Yep, absolutely, and they know it, and that's okay. That's fine. That's their business case, and they produce a ridiculously good piece of software. I don't want to. I'm going to get hell for this from some users that are on this forum, but they do. I mean, Lightroom and Photoshop are great pieces of software. There's no bones about it. I can't personally fathom that idea of having my creative work locked away by someone else based on a monetary compensation at that point. So that's just happens to me. When I did photography on film, there was never even a concept of this, right?
Yeah.
Right? Some D76, some fix, right? A light bag, and some patience and a timer, and I was done.
Right.
Right? So it was...
Well,
anyway.
no matter how good something like Photoshop or Lightroom is, having competition in I believe in any market, having competition is healthy. Anytime someone in any market, you think about a utility company, they don't give a darn about you. They will cut you off if they don't care about that because there's no competition. If they had competition, they would act a little differently. Yeah. And that's the same with Adobe and their products. If they don't have viable competition, then they may not act the same. I will say that one thing that makes it hard for your community there, Pat, is you don't have you have smart guys, you have smart people. Let me say, because it may be ladies too. You have smart people who are working on this, but they don't have the advertising dollars, and that can make a big difference, at least in how many people get to use the software and use the stuff like that. That advertising dollar is hurts you in that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned that. I've been wrapping my head around some of this idea for quite some time because we do have a lot of idealists in the free software community. As a matter of fact, one of my good friends from the Darktable project, Tobias, made that point the other day. Was why would free software need advertising at all when it just is? Right. So they're not motivated by having more people use the software. Mm-hmm. That's the fundamental difference, right? They don't care if you use the software or not in a lot of cases.
Because they're not making a profit off it, yeah.
And it's their hobby. They enjoy solving those problems. So Darktable, for instance, has no Windows build because, A, they don't feel that they can see a benefit in terms of helping to push the software forward from the user base that would mostly be Windows. They don't feel that those users are valuable to them in terms of helping them to progress the software further, and rather it's more trouble than it's worth. And that's a good point, right? It's hard to make that argument with them, especially when a lot of Windows users don't produce good feedback in a lot of cases. I'm hoping to change their opinion on that, because I happen to be a Windows user. And it's a fantastic piece. I have Darktable running now. I can show you a little later this evening, but I have to run it in a virtual machine here while we're working. But it doesn't have that same thing. That's part of the reason why I created Pixels in the first place, right? I feel that I would like to evangelize the ideas behind free software and photography. Like, at the end of the day, the most important thing to me, I think, is that anybody who wanted to, that could afford a camera at least, could have access to tools that would let them do as the same type of thing that almost anyone else would be able to do, from a ridiculously good professional portrait photographer down to just happy snapshots of your grandchildren. But those tools, I feel personally, should be accessible to everybody.
I tell you, one of the things I like about your site. I mean, this is for a lot of our listeners and viewers who. I think in our community we have all aspects. You have people who are very technical from a computer standpoint, and from a photography standpoint. You have people who are moms and dads with a camera who all I want to do is pick up and shoot, and I really don't know anything, that side of it. I don't want to get involved in that technical stuff. Where I get a little frustrated is with the backing up, and I preach about it, and I don't think I'm making much headway in getting people to actually back up. But on your side with the free software, sometimes with these people who are not, they don't know those alternatives. They think Photoshop and Lightroom is my only options. Finding what are my options is difficult, and then you have this site where bam, there they all are. Well, maybe not all, but there's a lot of them, and links directly to them. If you want to know, what are my options for raw processing? There it is, Darktable RAWTherapee. I downloaded RAWTherapee because I'm on a PC, so I have that, and of course GIMP, and I downloaded GIMP. But some of these others I've never used before. But over time, I'm going to download these ones that are for PCs and give them a try, and I have a great list right here on your site that lists them all out for me. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, there's a long overdue article for the site that basically walks through for a beginning photographer or someone just kind of learning the ropes and saying, look, if you're brand new, here's the most common things you're going to be using. There's your raw processing will be Darktable or RAWTherapee depending on what you're on, and here's some tutorials on how to use those at the base, because there's some guys there are some other guys that are making ridiculously great and well polished and just information dense, like Robert Hutton from the Darktable community, that's making these really dense and wonderful videos on learning how to do these great things in Darktable that not a lot of people know about. It blows me away that's not.
Well, you think about the motivation, like you said, is not there because they're not looking at this as a profit game. So that you got that going against you, and then you got the marketing dollars of the other side, and not just the marketing dollars of Adobe, but you've got all these other players that are making money off of Adobe's stuff by having online courses or paid videos or all those kind of things. So there's a whole industry stacked up against that side. So just getting the message out that there is an alternative sometimes is difficult. But I want to ask you. I have a list of questions here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but
sure.
Like you mentioned, the guy who's making a Darktable. So who are these people, and how are they making money off this thing, and what keeps them motivated? Like let's take GIMP for example.
Sure.
It has been around for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that some of the people on it have rotated on and off, and without going too deep into the woods where we lose everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Give me a quick overview of how does work happen on it? How often is it updated? Who's doing this, and why do they do it if they're not getting paid?
Yeah, right. So the why I can't answer for everybody, but generally I feel like it comes down to these people enjoy solving problems, and creating software is a stringing together a lot of problem solutions to produce a desired effect, and they enjoy that. Like some of the guys on Darktable really enjoy tackling some of these very particular types of image processing problems to get to a desired effect. The problem is what drives a lot of people. The love of working on something in a community drives people from another aspect of it. Honestly, in all the online communities I've ever been in, the GIMP crew of people, the core people that you'll see every day or talk to every day in the GIMP chat room on IRC, for instance, are just really fun people to hang out and talk to. They're really knowledgeable and irreverent and funny, and that kind of sits on top of that whole layer of, hey, we're working on this piece of software down here, but we're not so deep in the woods that we can't make really odd, funny jokes all through the day in various ways. So the way that the work gets done is that it's distributed. Anybody can go get the source code, right? So if you think that you wanted to program something or make a new button that does a thing or a new type of blurring algorithm, you can go download the software and try it, build it, and see if you can get it to work on your end. If it does, you can package the whole thing up and send it to us in GIMP and say, hey, I made this thing. Can you use it? And it will get vetted by some core people to make sure that it's safe, non-malicious, does what it's going to do, and doesn't explode the universe.
So there are some GIMP people, some like official...
Some checks and balances to it also.
Yeah, some people who have to say what you did is okay and we'll let it in.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a core crew of about... Go ahead.
I guess the question is, so you got this free software, and you got people working on it, and I know some people do it for the passion of it and the community of it, but obviously they must do something else in their lives because you're not making money on this. Yeah. At least I don't think you're making any money on it.
Right.
So this is just because, and you see this all the time with, let's say, forums for somebody. There'll be moderators in there that don't get paid. I mean, Mike and I, we don't get paid to do this.
Right.
So we do this out of our enjoyment of photography. So I guess really that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Just take your enjoyment of photography and now make it programming an algorithm for edge detection, right? Or sharpening pixels and images, right? So it's and it's, you know, some of the guys, what happens is some of the guys are offset where the companies that they work for, if it's a related industry, will offset the costs of their time. Right. So like Google has that 20% time. You're familiar with Google's 20% time at their company. So every week you get 20% of your time you can spend on any project you want. Sometimes it might be an open source project. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my company doesn't do that for me.
My company doesn't do that for me either. Hey, Tim, so
Neither
the GIMP website, I actually know the guy who created this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know what that guy's name is?
No.
Pat David.
Oh, as he's pointing. Oh, very good.
So Pat created the GIMP website.
Well, yeah, no, I updated the GIMP website is what I should say. Yeah. And the reason that I think I got around to doing that was Google was going to start penalizing people for not having mobile-ready websites.
Yes.
So if your website is not mobile compatible right now, you're going to get pinged in the Google PageRank algorithm. I wanted to make sure that the GIMP website didn't fall to irreverence just because we have a lot of anyway. So it was due for a facelift, and it was a lot of fun to set up. And it wasn't really all me. I have to give quite a bit of credit to people like Liam and Zimone and Vile and a bunch of guys from the GIMP team that just put up with me pounding, asking Michael Schumacher, asking them questions and bugging them to get something done. But yeah, it was.
Well, it's a good looking site.
Thank
you. You mentioned these people who are working on it and all that kind of stuff. With Adobe and with Lightroom, there is somebody I can call if I have help. What do I do if I need help in the GIMP community? Let's just stay on GIMP for now. If I need some help with GIMP and there's not quite as many YouTube videos out there on GIMP on how to do something. So what do I do if I need help?
So that's actually a fun secret of GIMP is that there's usually a representative from the project in almost any social media that you're probably on, right? Okay. If you're in Google+, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Reddit, if you're asking on Twitter, if you're wherever you might be, chances are there's somebody from the community somewhere trying to help out in some way. So wherever you ask the question, we'll try to help for the most part. If not, you can always come to our chat room on IRC, which is GIMP, or depending on what you're doing, there's two main websites that really are big communities for GIMP users. One is more artistically based, and that would be called gimpchat.com. It's been around forever and a day, and it's got some ridiculously talented artists and users on that site. If you ask a question, the community is almost always receptive and will do their best to answer. The other one might be me, or Meet the GIMP is an old one that had over 7 years worth of videos from a man named Rolf Steinort, who was a big inspiration for me to create the stuff that I ended up making with pixels and trying to help people out. Because he did kind of what you're doing now, right? Except it was just a one-man show walking through something cool or interesting in GIMP or free software. And he did that for over 7 years, making a video every so often.
Yeah.
So you can go to those places, right? You come to Pixels, go to the GIMP IRC, go to GIMP chat, and say, "Hey, I have a problem. I'm trying to do this thing." And chances are you'll find somebody to give you a hand and give you, there it is,
Yep. Yeah, and
if you're doing photography, come to Pixels. That's the easiest way to do it.
I would. Oh wait, what else would you use GIMP for?
Oh well, painting, digital painting. We have a lot of digital painters, comic artists. There's a very famous David Ravoy from France that makes a webcomic called Pepper and Carrot. He used to use GIMP quite often. So there's a lot of digital artists that way.
Okay.
If you're not using pure photography, right? So there's composite images, people that create these surreal, fantastic images that are, composites of multiple photographs, things like that.
Sure.
Digital art side of stuff.
Okay. I tell you, so the software we use to produce this show is called vMix, and it's not as big as some of its competitors. You can spend a lot of money on like a physical TriCaster, which some of the big networks use, or Wirecast. You might have heard of Wirecast, which is a bigger company, or some of those others. But the thing I love about vMix, other than the actual working of it, which is great, is the community over there. They have a nice little forum with the community, and the guy who actually writes it, the owner, interacts in the forums, and if you run into a problem, he's there, especially when a new update comes out that he's already tested everything, and you go, "Oh, this isn't working." Usually the next day there's an update going on. Oh, yeah. And that ability to be able to be that close to the people that are developing it, there's a great feeling for that wow, they actually listen to what I have to say. And it sounds like you're getting a little bit of that with GIMP, where you're able to talk with some of the people that are on the team, and I'm sure they're not turning around updates the next day, but at least you're getting some insight and some discussion with people that are closer to that versus the front end people that Adobe's hired that really maybe not have anything to do with the product.
That's exactly right. And it's probably the coolest part about that community aspect of things. We're still small enough that almost anyone can come into the GIMP chat room and talk directly with the developers that make and manage the software on a day-to-day basis, right? Or your raw processor. I mean, I spend most days, I've always got a window idling where I've got main developers from like the RAWTherapee project or the Darktable project or the GIMP project always idling in the background doing something. And at any point, we can start as discussions come up and people hop in and out, let their voice be heard, kind of hop in and out. And it's fantastic. It really is. Because it's not hundreds and thousands of people clamoring for some kind of thing unless it's about save versus exporting GIMP, which we shouldn't talk about. So it's great. It really is. I cannot recommend it as a community enough to go and check it out, because there are often times where you'll say, hey, here's a thing that I think would be really neat. And it will absolutely be considered at the very least. Somebody will look at it and say, yeah, that's not a half bad idea, or say, nope, you're out of your mind. It will never happen.
All right. So all those great things and great reasons for using it, outside of the marketing issue, why do you think it is that more people are not trying it?
I think that there's a few problems, right? So the marketing issue is a big one. Again, that's one of the biggest reasons I've created Pixels in the first place, was to kind of produce a highly polished, informative place for people to kind of put our best foot forward from the free software world for photography in particular. Because there are some really good photographers, just forget the free software stuff, really good photographers in the community that happen to do that too. So in the past, there was no localized location, no central location to go and see that, right? I can go to Flern, I can go to Kelby One, I can go to lynda.com. I used to write for Petapixel. I don't know if you're familiar with Petapixel. So I used to write for Petapixel and Mike Zhang back in the day, and DIY photography. Yeah. Udi is a nice guy. Anyway, so those are all places where you get to see these great pieces of works being done by proprietary people, proprietary software users at that point. But very rarely do you see it as often showing off what's capable of being done in free software. And I said that needs to change, right? If anyone's going to consider this as an actual viable substitute, I have to show them that there are works that can be accomplished that will blow your mind in their level of quality and polish. That completely gets done in free software, and there's quite a few people that do that.
Okay.
So,
well, let me ask you a few questions about. There's two main things I photograph, and we'll maybe walk through a little bit of a scenario on both of them. One is sports, where I go and shoot a sport. I go and shoot a game, basketball, soccer, swimming, whatever it is, and I might come back with hundreds, if not over 1,000 photos.
Yep.
So that's one thing. And then Tim's looking at me. You think I'm crazy?
I think he's crazy when he does it, but
So that, and then the other side is almost the polar opposite, where I go shoot landscape and I may come back with 50 photos or something like that. And in that one, sometimes I'm mixing HDR in and that kind of stuff. But let's start with the sports one first.
Sure.
So I'll tell you my workflow real quick, and then we can talk about how I would do this using free software.
Sure.
I come home with the 1,000, let's say 1,000 photos from shooting a basketball game or games. And I put the card in, download the photos then to Lightroom, and then in Lightroom I've got my finger on the X and the P. B and X is no, I don't care about that one.
Reject. Right.
P, reject. P is flag it as far as good. And I'm just going through the images, XP, hopefully more P's than X's, doing that kind of stuff to call the images, get down to a workable number, because I got somebody's back, or I got out of focus, or there's all kind of reasons for not wanting that image. And I get down to a manageable number, and now what I'm going to do, and all this is in Lightroom, I'm going to go through and make some basic edits that will be good for all the images. Maybe my white balance was off, and I'm going to fix that, and I can copy that to almost all the images. Or I shot high ISO, and I can make some high ISO adjustments to a whole bunch of them at one time. Or maybe I got to do them in groups. Sometimes if I have a wide range of ISO, I may change all the really high ones, all the middle ones, and all the lower ones. But I'm able to copy some of those adjustments across a larger thing. And then for the most part, I'm done. I'm not looking to get the perfect photo where I spend an hour on every image. I'm now done and I can post it online. And it may go through, do some real quick edits to individuals. But yeah, I'm not spending a ton of time on each one of those.
Right.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Were you done?
Yep, I'm done.
Yes. All right. So here's the thing, really. There's almost 99.9% of users will find an almost direct corollary between software they're already using, its proprietary, whatever it is, and something will be available in the free software world. The two big ones for what you're talking about, right? So I actually have a third step in between that a lot of people will use. One of the users on our forum is a man that creates a piece of software called Rapid Photo Downloader, whose only job it is when you plug in that SD card, it lets you batch, rename, sort, file, and move files from that SD card onto your local file system or somewhere else if you needed to, automatically for you, right? So we would absolutely bring them all in, and however your organization might be. And then what happens is in Darktable or RAWTherapee, which are the primary, raw processing standalone software you're going to find in free software world, they all have tagging features and rating features in them in the same exact way.
Okay.
I could absolutely map an X and a P button in either of those two softwares to either delete or flag for deletion, or just mark it as a flag for deal with this later, or give it 1 star or 2 stars or 3 stars. I think Lightroom has stars, doesn't it?
They do. And I'm not so particular that it has to be an X and P. Just some format of being able to call the images.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can absolutely do it in this way. I think that your style of shooting might be slightly different than mine, but the idea is that, yes, you can absolutely do the exact same thing.
Okay.
Right? Load it up. Just take Lightroom, throw it out, grab RAWTherapee, it's free, and you can do the exact same thing, right? So, yes, X, X, P, 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 X, X, P, 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 and you can just roll through them one, bang, bang, bang. And what happens, you can also then, you'll have a series of images, and you can do batch processing the same way in Lightroom, right? So you say, well, these 27 photos are all in similar lighting conditions, so let me fix the white balance and apply it across all of them. Okay. Let me fix some slight color and exposure tweaking and apply it across all of them. And when I'm happy, I batch export all of them to TIFFs or PNGs or JPEGs, and I can go from there. Either upload them to 500 pixels or Flickr or something automatically in the case of like Darktable, or for me at least, dump them into a folder and decide if I want to continue working on them further or not.
Since I'm on a PC, I can't use Darktable. I have to use RAWTherapee. And by the name, RAWTherapee, I imagine can deal with raw images, because I didn't mention that all those images were raw images.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I imagine RAWTherapee then is dealing with the raw images. Hopefully this may be a trick question, or a question that
Go ahead.
It doesn't have a good answer. Is that a non-destructive edit in RAWTherapee?
Yes.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
These aren't like So what happens again? I can't stress. I hate to make that comparison, because in our free software world, we very rarely like to make a direct comparison. We'll never say, for instance, that GIMP is a Photoshop clone or competitor, because that's never our intent. Our intent is diametrically opposite to what Adobe's business model is. We have no interest in that. And it's the same with RAWTherapee, right? They're not interested in battling Lightroom or being a clone or anything at all like that. But it just so happens that functionally, from a user standpoint, from your standpoint, it's identical in terms of what that functionality is more or less offered to you for the most part.
Okay.
Maybe not one-to-one in every single individual function, but from a holistic standpoint of how you would approach using it, it's going to be the same, honestly. Okay. It's non-destructive in terms of all those edits are made and saved in an external sidecar file. PP3 in our case. In Darktable, it'll be XMP, and in Lightroom, it'll be something else.
Maybe XMP there too.
Might be an XMP there also, and or an option to save it in metadata as part of the Lightroom database. But my point only is that those are stored separately. So you could always go back to the original RAW file. That never gets modified. All you're doing is storing a bunch of changes to that and processing to that RAW file, and then whether or not you output it or not. So,
well, that's good to hear, because I didn't know anything other than Lightroom did that, and that was really one of the big things to me on Lightroom, because before that I was always making a copy of a photo and then editing that photo, and then you don't know which is the real version. It was. I hated that previously to Lightroom, and when I realized Lightroom was non-destructive, that was That was a huge selling point for me.
I had
because now you could dive into it and not care.
Right, I don't care.
Right? I could go full sliders everywhere and just try it all and say, yeah, I love it. Or no, this is awful. But it's 2 seconds to get back to where you were.
Exactly.
I did the same thing, Tim. I had a whole separate directory that was called Originals.
Yeah,
and it was
exactly.
all the originals, and I never touched them.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I had a great question.
And it's actually funny because what I actually do is these days I'm still kind of old school. When I pull all those files into a directory, I actually use a different piece of software called ImageMagick, which is just command line. There's no GUI or anything for it. And I actually generate contact sheets.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll generate
I haven't seen a contact sheet in years.
I know. I generate one image where each little thumbnail is exactly 200 pixels, and I've got that. And I'll just scan through it. Because what happens is that I'm not a very good photographer, so my keeper rate is like 1 out of 100. So rather than having to P every 99 X's, I just print it out. I just get my contact sheet and scan through and go, well, that's the only one that's any good. And that's easy for me to look at the file name, and I just go deal with the other ones. I can just toss at that. Yep. I do. I still make contact sheets all the time.
I see nothing wrong with that. And matter of fact, I should probably print them out because you think about all the pictures I have in my hard drive that I don't even see. And if I at least had a contact sheet, it would be easy to refer to something. Because I know at the end of the year, I do a calendar of my kids. And throughout the year in Lightroom, I actually, because I put keywords. That was the other thing that I liked about Lightroom. I'll put keywords in there. One of the keywords I put on a bunch of them is calendar. Just so I know at the end of the year, I can easily find those pictures as opposed to going through 10,000 pictures trying to find those 25 that I really want.
Absolutely.
Keyword. So you sticking with my sports scenario.
Sorry, Mike.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Because you brought up something that makes me think. Staying with the sports analogy, and I want to point out in the sports theme here. I mean, this is how I really do it. I don't know if I ever go into Photoshop with my sports images. I'm not going to bring them in there and do all that editing in Photoshop. I'm going to stick in Lightroom. So in this scenario, it's all about the Lightroom alternative. I do keywording when I'm bringing them in. I like to do keywording of the images. I might do in some of them. I might do some of the clones, some light clone stamping. Not very much because Lightroom is not that great with clone stamping. But I might also do some vignetting on some of the images, or the opposite, to get rid of some of the vignetting. Or I might do some. They have a great graduate tool, or how do you say that? Graduated tool where I can do something where I'm bringing down or doing something with changing the exposure on one part of it. Are you about to pull up RAWTherapee? Is that what you're looking at?
Actually, I did have it pulled up in the background. I realized I didn't have RAWTherapee open. I had GIMP and Darktable and these other ones, and I just wanted to make sure I fired it up.
Well, you can if you wanted to show something, you can show us either one. So in this scenario, just what all is possible without going into every aspect.
Yeah,
where am I going to struggle to replace something in Lightroom?
The keyword tagging might be a slight issue in some cases, and I can't tell 100% because I honestly don't keyword personally very much. But the other things are probably 99. So adjustment brushes is the thing that you're actually talking about for doing the heel selection in Lightroom. And I don't have an adjustment brush per se in like RAWTherapee, for instance. That's possibly on the roadmap. I don't know. I'd have to check with the devs and see if they feel like that's something that's important enough to spend some time on. But the other things, right? So like the vignetting, that's absolutely there. Graduated gradients, blended gradients, linear gradients, and what have you. Circular and elliptical gradients are all available too in various ways. Yeah, you can do all of those as well. Darktable has parametric masking, which takes it kind of to another level. I don't know that Lightroom has parametric masks.
I don't know.
I'm kind of stretching my knowledge. So it's basically a mask for an effect that is built based on something else about your image, right? So I use something, for instance, in landscape images very often called luminosity masking. You might have seen Tony Cooper, the Lightroom guy and the Photoshop guy, the photographer I think he's from the Southwest. Anyway, he's got some great. So what happens is that you'll mask parts of the image based on how bright they are.
Okay.
And so, for instance, I say, hey, I want all of the pixels in my image that are brighter than like middle gray. So I'm going to apply an effect to those pixels mostly. If it's dark, I don't affect it so much. If it's light, I'm going to affect it. So it's like if you do split toning in Lightroom,
Yeah.
where you'll put some color in the highs and some other color in the lower tones. It's a similar capability to that, but much more granular control, right? So I could say just the midtones.
Yeah.
Right, and do this thing to it, and then just the highlights, just do this thing to it. So there's a lot of functionality for stuff like that is ridiculously powerful. Right. So,
We've talked with Greg Benz and Blake Rudis on. They both have some type of product like that for Photoshop. And I'm looking at the clock, and more than half our time is already gone. So I don't want to stick too long on this Lightroom issue.
Sure.
But I was given a scenario where, in my case, I only really use Lightroom, and I did pick up I said the whatever it was, the cloning tool or whatever. I don't use that a lot on my sports images because, again, it's a volume thing. I'm doing so many, I need to do whatever I'm going to do and get them out. Now, when we go to the other side is where I will do some work in Photoshop. So now we're talking with my landscape images where I'm going to do less images, fewer of them, but I'm eventually going to rotate them either through Photomatics for an HDR or through Photoshop, or maybe both in both of them, and do that. So there's some key things that most Photoshop users are looking for in any kind of Photoshop replacement, and that is layers. Do I have layers? I wrote you a list. I don't remember if I know them. If I remember them all. Layers is one.
Yep.
What else, Tim? Levels, of course.
Yep.
Some way to sharpen, unsharp mask, or frequency. What was that? Frequency separation or something like that. Some other way to sharpen.
Sure.
And
was there more?
I know. It looked like I had more, but I can't remember the more. And I don't want to open my email where I emailed it to you because
probably adjustment layers.
Adjustment
might be
layers.
another
Yes.
one. Yeah, that's a huge one for Photoshop users that use it. So right. So it's almost a 1-to-1 replacement in GIMP for the most part. And there's a giant asterisk for caveats when I make that statement. For the most part, if you're opening an image and you're healing some things, right, a little bit of clone healing or spot healing, if you're making adjustments to levels or curves, right, changing some color toning a little bit, resizing, cropping, and then sharpening, and then exporting an image, we got you covered. Don't spend a dime, right? Okay. And I would honestly say probably for about 90% of photographers. Yeah. That's a big, and I say that thinking carefully about the entire spectrum of photographers. Honestly, I'd say probably like 90% of them would not have a need for anything further than what you can easily find in something like GIMP right now, right? You're going to have a hard time pushing the limits of what you can do in that aspect. And of course, there will be people that will skewer me for making a statement like that. I guarantee I'm going to. It's okay. I've got my flame retardant suit on. I'm ready. But it's so much of what you probably want to do on a day-to-day basis quickly and to make an image look good is already available at a problem. Unsharp mask, got that covered. Sharpening of various types. There's got dozens of different sharpening algorithms. They're all available to you. No problem. Levels, curves, tonal adjustments. No problem. Layers, got it. Masking of layers, right? Very important. Have that as well.
Actions? Do you
actions?
Can record
yeah,
actions?
Right.
Okay.
Well, no, right. So I don't actually have a macro recorder where what you'll do is you'll say start recording, do a bunch of stuff, stop recording, but save it as an action and just be able to repeat it. Right. We do have scripting, so I can, if I know how to write a script, I can say, oh, well, do this, and then apply a blur, and then resize it, and then crop it, and sharpen and export a JPEG for me. I can write that kind of script very easily. But no, I don't actually. We don't have a macro recorder yet that'll let you say start recording and then do a bunch of actions. In GIMP, right? So like in Darktable and RAWTherapee, for instance, we have things like, like an LR template, Lightroom template file, where it's basically a bunch of things that will get applied to an image. We can do those in the raw processing world. But on the GIMP side, we don't really have a macro recorder. We do have scripts though.
Okay.
And a lot of very talented people writing some pretty awesome things for that. But all those other things we have, right? So, and that's what's wild about it, right? Most things you're probably going to want to do, it's available to you for free without costing you a dime right now. And if you don't know how to do it, call me.
Yeah, I think that the majority of us, majority of photographers, only use a small portion of Photoshop. There's a lot that goes into Photoshop that we won't
Very
use.
small portion.
Yeah, and I think as more and more of us do just a Lightroom and you really use Photoshop even less.
Absolutely.
And you sometimes you got to think, do I want to pay that monthly subscription where I could just have Lightroom and then GIMP, and then maybe you think about, do I really need Lightroom anymore with that? Can I just stay in this one community? The free software. So it's definitely worth a look. And speaking of looks, are you going to show us something tonight with one of them?
I can show you anything you would like to see. I mean, it's.
I'd love to see some of the GIMP interface.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some fun GIMP stuff up right here. Let me bring this up for you here.
And then I'm going to have to get the shot ready. So the viewers, there may be a disruption we don't see the right thing.
Can you see my GIMP? Should I?
I do. So hold on. Let me get it ready. There you go. And you got rid of me. Good. I can. Wait, no. There we go. Yep.
Right. So here's the GIMP interface, and honestly, this is not anything that should be all that unfamiliar to most people, right? Like it's pretty common to have some sort of a tool palette, and this is adjustable. If I wanted to crunch it out, if I wanted to pull this out here, I can make all kinds of modifications to the interface.
Yeah.
I can certainly do that if I wanted to. And layer stacks over here. I actually was working on playing with something before we got started out here.
I see histogram.
Yeah, right. So I've got a view of my histogram down here that's showing me, So for instance, simple tools like levels. These are things that are very commonly adjusted in some way. This is. It'll take a minute because I don't know why it's
Well, you are also podcasting at the time, so
yeah,
your computer's being a little stressed.
These are the same exact levels that you're probably accustomed to seeing in Photoshop. There's nothing new here. I'm not showing anything odd here. I'm pulling a black point around. I'm pulling a white point around. I'm pulling a gamma slider around. This is the same levels tool I think that you'll have in in Photoshop as well, right? So this is nothing new, right? Auto, I can pick a gray point and have it automatically do that. So that kind of thing, curves, this is a very common tool, right?
Yeah.
Adjusting these, it'll be up in just a moment, but adjusting, an image.
Yeah, and I want people to realize that whatever speed you're seeing here is being hindered because we're also podcasting at the same time. He's got a lot going on, so that obviously is going to affect it. Because I've used it on my computer here without other things going on, just normal stuff, and I was pleased with the speed of GIMP. Yep,
should be very, very fast. So what I mean to say is that most of those tools are available to you in some way, and the more important thing is that the extensibility of this is great, right? So you have all of your layers. These are layers the same way you would know them on Photoshop. Adding layer masks is the same exact process, right? And by layer mask, really, I mean a way to make certain portions of your layer visible or non-visible based on So the tool sets are very similar, right? I've got brushes, I've got healing tools, I've got cloning tools, dodging and burning, airbrush brushes, rectangular selections, circular selections, free selections. All of these very, very common tools that a lot of people.
I'm not even sure what this tool is that you're doing right now.
This is just a rectangular selection. Just a selection.
Oh, okay.
Right? If I wanted to crop the image, I could just say, well, I'm gonna, let's do some very simple, let's highlight it, and let's put some thirds here. So now I could say, well, I'm gonna crop.
Rule of thirds, right?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm gonna crop, I just go to here, and when I'm done, I can just say image crop to selection, and I have my image cropped. That's all it is. Just a selection tool, right? I mean, it's nothing fancy. So all of the common tools are there. They may not be in the same place that you're accustomed to in Photoshop. They may not work exactly the same way as Photoshop. And that's honestly why most of my tutorials are based, when I write at least, around the concept of what you're doing, not the button you're pushing.
And so you have the black, white, so you can paint with black and white?
Yeah, or any other color I want.
I'm thinking when you're applying some kind of adjustment, you can on a layer, you can paint with black or white to reveal it.
That's right.
So you look like you have opacity levels for layers.
Yep. So like I have opacity for a layer in general.
Yeah.
Which I think will show up here shortly. That I can adjust. I can also, for instance, like a layer mask. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. Let me do it this way. Let's adjust the color balance of the image here. Let's make the shadows here. Actually, no. Let me do.
We are doing all this on the fly without practice, so
that's right. So let's give it some color, just to give you an example, right? So
yeah.
I've got something here. Now, what happens is adjusting that opacity of the overall layer. We'll make those modifications so it can be 100% transparent. Mm-hmm. It could be 100% opaque. It could be somewhere in between, right?
Yep.
Or maybe it's 100% here, and now if I add a simple layer mask, and I paint with white, just like you would on Photoshop, right? So if we zoom in here now, and I paint with a brush, I can come in and say, well, I want the eyes to black. I want the eyes to not be colored. Right? This is the idea.
Oh yeah, you're done now. Right. That image is awesome.
Right. So
I feel like I'm watching. What was that movie? Avatar.
Avatar. Dang it! You said it before.
Little Spielberg action. But my point only is that these layer masks are the same thing you're probably already accustomed to using.
Absolutely,
in Photoshop.
So you even have the blend modes. It looks like up there at top too.
Yeah, full set of blend modes. Right. You want it to be overlay. That's a fun one, isn't it? Grain merge. A couple that you don't have in Photoshop. Grain merge and grain extract. I don't think you have those in Photoshop.
I'm not familiar with those. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but all the rest of them, similar idea. And there's a bunch that Photoshop has that you won't see here yet. It's coming in the newer versions of GIMP soon. But basically every possible layer blend mode that you might have seen in something like Photoshop will more or less be available.
So speaking of that, how often with these guys not doing this, in their spare time, how often are they able to come out with updates?
So what happens is that the concept in the free software world is interesting. We have a stable release, which could be ridiculously old. In some software, it's really old releases because it was the last one that we happened to put out that got extensively tested, and we said, that's good, stamp it, release it, we've had a date on it. But there's always a version that's being worked on constantly with little tiny new features being added in almost on a daily basis, right? And so pretty often, I would say. And what's neat about an open source project is you can go and look at the history of commits of changes to the software at any time you want. Right? So you can go to the GIMP website, you can go find where the GIMP is available, and you can actually see a complete list of all of the we call them commits, but they're basically just changes to the software that have been added into the source code.
Nice. So I think I got the stable version. I think I downloaded the stable version. I need to go download. Is that what you're working on? Or are you working on
this one? Yeah, this one's a little bit older stable version because I'm not dumb enough to do a bleeding edge development version on a live podcast.
But I might go get that one.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's absolutely worth it. And because what happens is that one is the one that will now have high bit depth. So, like one of the complaints, so there's really three main complaints. Well, there's a pitch. So the biggest complaints you'll hear from people about GIMP, for instance, versus using something like Photoshop is fun. And I'm going to just go ahead and kick a hornet's nest for anyone that happens to be watching. One of them is CMYK separation. Mm-hmm. Do you guys ever do CMYK editing?
I actually don't know.
No.
Yeah, you know what it is, though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't matter. It might matter to a digital artist doing offset printing separations, but honestly, unless you're doing that type of offset printing, it probably doesn't matter. That print hanging behind you on the wall, I can guarantee you was probably not done on a CMYK printer. That's just my guess. I don't know where you got what lab you happen to use.
I don't know what they printed on. It was on White House custom color, and I sent them an RGB.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And chances are it stayed that way through the process. If it's like C41 or something, it probably stayed that way. Anyway, so CMYK separation, whatever, get over it. It's coming eventually, but it's not really a huge priority for us at the moment. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but there it is. Adjustment layers, right? In Photoshop, the cool thing about adjustment layers was that I could have a whole stack of effects that I've done, and then I can decide way down here at the bottom was an effect that I want to modify. Maybe it was a tone curve, right? I put a little curve or a level adjustment, but I didn't like it. I wanted to make a slight change to it, but I don't want to have to redo all the work that I've done. On Photoshop adjustment layers, what I can do is I can go all the way down to the bottom of that stack, change that one level, and it will percolate all the way up through all the other changes that I did automatically. We do not have that in GIMP at the moment. It's coming, but we don't have it now, and it's we have a lot of ways that we work around it, and a lot of us have adapted our workflow so it doesn't hamper us as bad. But the reality is, it's a really cool feature. There's really no question about that. We do have that coming soon.
Okay.
And then high bit depth. We hear about this all the time. You don't do 16-bit images. I'm a professional photographer. It has to be 16-bit. Otherwise, I can't operate.
Yeah, I can see that one. Yeah. So what is this? What is the thinking on that one?
Well, all right. So at the moment, the stable version of GIMP is 8-bit clamps. You can only do 8-bit editing in the stable version, the one that you're seeing here.
Right.
And the one that you can go download, that's the development version now, we go up to 64-bit files.
Okay.
So yeah, we do 16, we can do 32, we can do 64 floating point and integer precision images, and we've got some really, really smart color people involved that is way outside of my league of talking about working on the color models and the kind of color representation internally in GIMP. So the development version has a high bit depth that you can work with without worrying about loss. That's sort of the big problem, right? It's like if I go and pull that level slider around, even though it will look cool on my image, at the end of the day, I'll start introducing posterization and banding in the image,
right?
Because I'm starting to stretch things out that don't exist there anymore.
Exactly. So. Any use of the GPU yet? Are y'all taking advantage of the GPU at all yet?
Kind of ish. It depends on who's working on what branch on what thing that day.
Okay. It's something that I'm hoping that all software starts to make more use of it, because really, Lightroom doesn't use it that much. Photoshop doesn't. I bought a really great video card, mainly for our video production that we're doing here for the live show. Mm-hmm. And I thought I would get some benefit in Lightroom and Photoshop, and it's surprising. And not After Effects, Adobe Premiere, and surprisingly little impact because they're not using it that much. And I'm hoping that more and more software heads that direction of taking more advantage of that GPU. There's so much power there.
Right. Well, and so what happens is that some very smart, much smarter people than I have had a look at it. I don't know where that currently sits. As I understand it, there are some limitations with doing GPU processing of various sorts. But yeah, I'm not the best person to talk about those.
Okay.
So, like, for instance, here's another cool thing about the image processing, right? So in GIMP, we have a great plugin called GIMP, right? G''MIC, and it's this thing right here. It's called GIMP, right? And it's an interesting, like we were talking earlier about the community aspect of the thing. This is a piece of software that you will probably not see on your window because I'm not sharing that window.
It's okay.
Why not?
And Tim, if you have any, I don't know how you use Photoshop, but feel free to ask any questions I might be missing.
No, I don't use Photoshop. I really have stepped away, other than just recently where I removed people from a background to put a new background into it. Mm-hmm. Lightroom is 99% of my workflow now.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is very common. Absolutely. So, like, it's called GIMP. And what happens is that it's actually an image processing language created by Dr. David Schumperle at over in France at a university, a friend of mine. And what's wild about it is that he's receptive. You can talk to him, send him an email every day without missing a beat, and ridiculously smart, which means that we can implement some wild algorithms that might not otherwise have been easy to replicate otherwise, right? Mm-hmm, including things like this is, for instance, I don't know, did you happen to see that I had a lot of film emulations that I had created? You might have seen that somewhere, maybe.
I think so.
Yeah, so implementation of basically, do you ever use VSCO or any of the DxO film emulation packs. Have you seen any of those?
No.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd walk through a ton of these because people liked them. They liked having these basically emulations of what old films might have looked like.
Wow.
So we've got probably about 300 different film stocks that we've just kind of said, well, why not? Let's try and see how it comes out and looks. Let's see what we end up with. That's available in something like this. This includes things like frequency separations, wavelet decomposition, various kinds of smoothing algorithms, denoising algorithms, all just in this plugin. It's just a plugin. It's also free and open source. And
I saw that there's a link for that on your site also. Yeah.
Yep. It's something else as well worth looking at because it greatly expands the functionality that's available for you in something like GIMP. Go learn the other stuff too, but this is a toolbox. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to download this one. I don't have this one yet.
This one's nuts.
And we mentioned this earlier. You're doing this on a Windows machine. GIMP is available also for Mac and for Linux.
Yep.
So on any one of those three, you can use GIMP on any one of those three. RAWTherapee is I know Windows.
Also all three. Yeah.
Okay, and then Darktable is the one that's Mac only, right?
Yeah, Mac and Linux.
Oh, Mac and Linux. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, it's important to me because, for instance, I'll switch between OS X at home, Windows at work, and probably a Linux box soon at home, or at least a new Linux box soon at home. I like having the same environment everywhere I go, right? So when I hop to a Linux box, and that's actually one of those neat things about GIMP. I can go just about anywhere.
Yeah.
Go grab a copy of GIMP, because it's going to run on just about any of those, and I've instantly got my editing platform available to me without skipping a beat. Yeah.
Well, you think about the photographer who has a desktop, because really, you can't replace the power of a good desktop, with a laptop. I mean, if I can build a desktop that can outperform your laptop any day of the week. So some people have both. That's laptop when I'm traveling, desktop when I'm at home, and some of those softwares you use you may not be able to legally have a license to use it in both places. In some cases, I'm not sure about Lightroom and Photoshop, but I know there's some other software where you need to have a license for each one, which is not going to be a problem with a product like this. You can have it on as many computers as you want.
Absolutely. Yep. And usually it'll be the same interface and the same functions and the same toolboxes available to you all across there, which is pretty neat.
We're coming up on the time, but a couple of things I want to get through, if we could, is
of course.
What about HDR? That's one of the things I would do with my landscapes. I might do some HDR with that. Yep,
no problem. So we have what we call Luminance HDR, which previously had the wonderful name of QTPSFST GUI. I think those are the acronyms. I have to go back and double check. But they so what happens is there's two aspects to the HDRs, right? One is the creation of an HDRI image, right? So basically stacking your exposures, combining them into one image that has an extended pixel dynamic range for each one of those luminous slices. And then there is the part that gets abused by most people, and that's the tone mapping of the HDR, right? Because technically your HDR contains luminous information that goes far beyond what your monitor is capable of displaying to you.
Right.
And in some cases, possibly what your eyeballs are capable of seeing in a single scene, even though our eyes are very good at adapting to that. So if we want to show it on a monitor, we have to take that big, giant, expanded, right, luminous range and squish it down into an 8-bit image that'll show up on a web page, right? Or print, possibly. So that's the tone mapping. And there's lots and lots of ways, because the question is, how do you do it, right? I can't fit the full range. So do I fit all of these guys and throw away these guys and some of these guys down in the darks? Do I just make it all dark and just a little bit of the lights? What do I do? So there's a lot of different algorithms for how to automate that process. And that's the tone mapping. I'm guessing you use Photomatics.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So do the words like Mantiuk, Drago, Fatal, Durand, do any of those names ring a bell to you at all in using the software maybe?
Sorry, no.
Okay. That's no problem. It's basically the name of the guys that came up with those algorithms for doing the tone mapping. So Luminance HDR is a software that will let you take a bunch of images that you've shot, different exposures, squish them together into making an HDR image, and at the same time, if you'd like, tone mapping them into a low dynamic range image so that you can see it.
Yeah, I had the page pulled up just a second ago, and you have it. This is such a great resource here on your site with all these things listed.
Oh, the projects, yeah.
Yeah, all these things that have, because I have a Windows machine. All these things have a Windows icon next to it.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that until just a couple of minutes ago when I looked at it, and you have the icon next to it as to what to run on, which is also awesome because I can go down here and say, all right, here's all these things that run on Windows that I might want to take a look at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But so Luminance HDR should be on there, and that's and there's actually another one that's out now that's out now, but it is anyway. There's another piece of software called HDR Merge, which is neat because it actually takes like multiple exposure RAW images and writes out a high dynamic range RAW image by itself, one DNG file that has high dynamic range data inside of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's super handy.
This compilation is great because you know what? I never even heard of probably 3/4 of these.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know what most of them do.
It's a great one-stop shopping. Yeah,
exactly. Great one-stop shopping for if anybody wants to look them up. You go right to this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Are you about to share something else with us?
You were talking about HDR images, so I just hopped over to an HDR image.
Okay, let me get this ready.
Which may or may not show up. But yeah, no, so there's that's most of all of the ones that are of any interest probably from a free software standpoint. There's a couple on there from some users in the community that are not technically free software just because they haven't figured out how they wanted to license those things yet. But there's, Light Zone. I think there's some raw processors I didn't even mention there, and there are Light Zone and a couple of others, if I'm not mistaken. There's also like Photo Flow, which is actually here's this neat thing about this community, right? So there's forums. I don't know if you know this, but there's forums on Pixels. It's if you click on the hamburger icon in the top left, you'll get a pullout. Yeah, so there's the forums. So we actually have members in the forums that make that software you see in the left, Filmulator, Photo Flow. Those are under the raw processing. And those people are daily on the forums talking about updates they're doing and soliciting feedback from people. Like if you wanted to actually be involved with the creation of a raw processing software for photographic workflows from scratch, from the beginning, this guy just started. Get on a forum. Say, hey, this would be a neat thing to have. I'd love to be able to do this. And I guarantee you they will be receptive to it. Yeah. These are from Andres Ferreira, who'd written some other tutorials on the site, and Carlo Vacci, another user on the site as well, Filmulator and Photo.
Yeah, it looks like an active site. And I see a post here I already want to click on, but I won't right now. GIMP 2.9.
Oh. I should go look at that. Oh yeah, and luminosity mask error. No, that was there's another one. I actually just fixed that luminosity masking. That was what we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
I just fixed that mask, the script for somebody earlier on. That's what they were asking about.
It wasn't I wasn't concerned about the error, just the GIMP 2.9. You always, no matter what version you have, you're always excited for when's the new version coming out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the cool thing is that in free software, the new version's coming out almost daily if it's an active project. There's always something new coming.
It's I guess that's human nature. As soon as you release something, you go, when's the next one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a great resource. The tutorials, I'm doing my best to try to get some new stuff on. We have community members that are coming on and doing some things as well. That was one of these other things, right? So if you go and look for GIMP tutorials online, chances are you're going to find 99 really shitty GIMP tutorials. Guarantee it. You're going to end up with a whole ton of them that are no good at all, and they stink. And it gives us a bad name. And that was one of the other reasons for making Pixels. I said, let me make sure that I flood the market with good tutorials and stuff that we care about showing folks to counter that. Right? Because if you go look, and it's not that Photoshop doesn't have the same thing. It's just that for some reason, if I go out and say photography, Photoshop, sharpening or details, I might get, Calvin Hollywood's freaky details or some other cool, you do it in GIMP, you might not get it. You might get a lot of really, really not good tutorials, and it doesn't look good on us. It doesn't reflect well on us as a community, which is one of the other reasons I made Pixels in the first place.
Smart idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, we are at the hour, and I feel like, there's still so much to talk
Yeah,
about
I feel
here.
bad. I feel like we should have I feel like it would have been more. You know what? I'll come back some other time.
Absolutely.
We'll focus on one thing. We'll say let's make a let's take a landscape from raw to finished file in free software. And I'll say, yeah, no problem. We'll walk through in 40 minutes. I'll have gone through the whole thing for you step by step.
That would be awesome because, I said this at the beginning. This is really a big topic, and this is our first time really covering it. There was no way we could do this topic justice in one show. This is more of an introductory to for our people,
Yep.
who they may already. We may have people in our audience already using GIMP all the time, or some other form of free open source software. But I'm sure we have a lot of people who've never tried it before. So this is an introductory show for those people. I do want to do more on this, and I think a walkthrough of editing an image like that would be awesome to do that. Maybe we can do that with GIMP and one of the raw editors too.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So here in the closing, I want to go over a few things in closing, and then we'll wrap things up. And that is Chad found us over there on Vimeo. If I know Pat, a lot of your guys are over in Europe, and maybe they couldn't stay up and watch us. They're not going to hear this then anyway until they watch us. But you can get the show on Vimeo, on YouTube, on iTunes in video format. And audio format, we're all over the place. Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podomatic, Podbean, and soon to be Google Play Music. I don't think we're on Zune or BlackBerry anymore.
Probably a good idea.
Tim. We're not somewhere you want to find us. Let me know, and I'll try and get us there. For every month we have a photo contest in our forums, so we'd love to have you come out to our forums if I can find that. Not the forums, Facebook. Love to have you come out to our Facebook group and join our Facebook group. Really easy, facebook.com/JPEG2RAW. Come out there, join the group, and join our photo contest that we have every month. The only prize is you get your image at the top of the page every month. Then at the end of the year, we do a annual best of photo contest, and with that one, you do win stuff. With that one, wrong button. The way we are able to give stuff away, because Tim and I mentioned this maybe in the pre-show, we don't, just like the free open source community, we don't do this show for money.
No.
Tim and I both have our own individual jobs, and this show is more of a money suck than it is a money maker, because of all the monitors that Pat pointed out in the pre-show. I paid for all those personally, and hopefully my wife doesn't come down here and see all this. But we do have some ads on the show, and we on the site, and we do have our Amazon affiliate link. If you use Amazon, you go to jpeg2raw.com/Amazon. We get a small credit for that. We don't use those funds to support the show. What we do with that is we use them in our giveaways. Giveaways of either at the end of the year in our photo contest, or depending on how much money we make in other ways. But we give all that money back, 100% of that money back, through giveaways to help out photographers. Because even if you are using the free open source software, you got to buy the lenses, the cameras, the computers. It is an expensive hobby or business, whichever one you're doing. So we like to give back. We, in addition to Amazon, we have a Topaz Labs link where you can use, if you want to buy something for Topaz Labs, go to jpeg2raw.com/Topaz Labs. And back on the Amazon thing, it does not have to be a photo thing. It could be anything. It could be a phone. It could be, Tim could buy his Fitbit on there if they sell it on there. It could be anything you're buying from there.
And it doesn't cost you any more.
It doesn't cost you anymore. Nope, it doesn't cost you anymore. And I don't know what it is you're buying. So if you're buying something personal you don't want me to know, I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's been shipped. I don't know anything like that. So buy whatever you want to buy there. Just go to our link before you go there. And then I clicked this button earlier. We do have forums. You could have, if you go on there, you would have seen Pat on our forums on our calendar, and some links and information about him. That's a great way to keep in touch with what shows are coming up. We have some links there, plus some other posts and stuff. It's not very active, not nearly as active as Pat's forums, but it's slowly growing, and we hope to get more people out there. And then one last thing. Let me get this ready. We are doing a giveaway with a previous guest to the show. And Stacy Jensen over at Color Veil has given us her photographer's planner guide. And if you go to our website or on our Facebook page, there is a newsletter subscription thing. All you got to do is sign up for the newsletter before the end of February, and you'll be entered to win her photographer's planner guide. And great thing about our newsletter, we don't actually have one yet, so you're not going to get spammed. And if Mike never finds the time to do it, we may never have one. So don't worry about spam and all that kind of stuff. Just sign up for the newsletter. Tim, anything I missed there?
I think you covered it all.
I think I covered it all. If I missed anything, there's always next show. And speaking of that, until next show, keep it raw. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.